Hello everyone to a edition of Friday Night Knives, which I'm going to call the Saturday Night Special, simply because I was not feeling 100% on Friday, so it didn't get done on Friday, so it is now Saturday. But today's version is going to be on this, the absolutely wonderful CRKT Pilar 3. Yeah. Relatively new, third generation. I do not have the Pilar 1 or 2, though they have gotten rave reviews for a long time now from other reviewers and multiple reviewers. This is a Jesper Voxnaes, I'm going to screw it up. But it is Voxnaes design, which if you're not a fan of Voxnaes design, two things I'm going to say. One, you probably have ginormous hands. And two, where you been? I am most definitely a fan of the Voxnaes design and its design philosophy. Here we have an Urban EDC Supply F5.5 special. You can see some of the design language. And of course, I have a Biblio. This one was the natural in black and tan that I dyed. Meant to dye orange. It turned out red. It still looks good. You can definitely see the design family language there. In fact, I would even go to say is I like to compare them to whales. I kind of think of this one as like an orca. This one is a bit like the sperm whale. And this one is a bit like a humpback or even so much as like the blue whale. The blue whale would probably be much larger. But that long, sleek feeling is there, as well as with the eye holes. Good ergonomics, choils, placement for fingers. There is, and the Biblio is for such a small design, it really does pack an ergonomic punch. I am a big fan of his designs, and this one is another ergonomic, fantastic piece. If you thought that he was going to mess it up, you're wrong. He didn't. And CRKT does a really good job of this execution. This is the D2 version with the brass spacer. It has caged bearings, a full deep carry clip. So you can see these screws are even recessed, and so is the spot for the clip. Smooth all the way through. Stainless steel, smooth right up to the top. The lanyard is prioritized slightly over that, but not so much that it is out. And it is not only prioritized, it is well thought out. It's not just a hole, it's rounded. It's not going to start chewing away on your lanyard. I'm not a lanyard person, but if you are, that one not only centers it, but it kind of rounds off the hole, which is a really nice, thoughtful piece. If you can see that, it's chamfered, it's rounded. That's really nice for those that do carry. I think action, it's on bearings. This thing's barely had to break in. It's great. That long belly that's not over pronounced. Finger choil. You can back it up without the choil, but it is meant to be with the choil. And it is not only meant to be with the choil, it is comfortable. A couple of size comparisons. Actually, before size comparison, I'm going to go into value because at $50 for the D2, it starts to run into some area things. Number one, we're going to get out of it the value per dollar liter. If you just need one knife, not that this is a plug, but if you just need one knife that's going to do everyday carry things and you don't want to have a bunch, you don't want to spend a bunch of money, QSP Penguin and D2. It's something like $35. It is an EDC machine for really cheap, but inexpensive because it is quality. It's got a straight, easy to sharpen blade. It's approximately the same size, but there is so much more hand room on the CRKT. Another one that, that's really, we start hitting the bargain basement part, so it doesn't knock this out of the way of the absolute value per dollar. However, the fit and finish and other attention to detail does make this one, in my opinion, a bit better. At that $50 price range, we start running into things like the Rat 2 and D2, which I have right here, and I have dyed purple. And another one, to give you an idea of the size, the CJRB feldspar here in natural micarta. Don't have the bits here, but if you can see, it is just a little bit smaller. The Rat 2 is just a hair smaller. But if you notice on each of these, neither of them has anywhere close to the hand space on there, nor are they as tall. I personally like both of these knives. I am very much a fan of the CJRB feldspar. But as we look into it, you start to run into, well, what does this knife compete against? And I'm going to have a couple out here. One, the Honey Badger D2 Medium. Almost exactly the same length. Very similar cutting edge lengths. Very similar opening without the thumb, or without the flipper on the CRKT, but with the flipper on there. Relatively large size handle, very hand filling as well, works well with larger size hands as well. This knife in D2 is also, as well as the drop point, something that would go right alongside this. Another one that we have here, I have the fancy one, but if you get the less fancy one, the Civivi Ortis. This right here is another knife that is approximately the same size, if not just a hair longer. I would say a hair longer, with significantly more cutting edge, lots of hand space as well. As you can see, slightly more than that, and even more, if not the same, as the Honey Badger. Lots of hand space in the handle. Can get a good full grip on this, as well as pinch up on the choil or get a little light and do on the blade. With that nice clip point. Like I said, I have the carbon fiber and 9CR18 base Damascus. I happen to really like this one. This is also a really good value knife dollar. This one's a little bit more expensive. The cheaper versions run right alongside this, so you have a bit lesser steel. Again, bigger hands go well with this one. And just also a little bit, it's a giant mouse as well. Even if it's a good design, but poor not so great execution, the Anso designed method. Have one of those too. Another heavy-duty knife you can get in this price range is the Kershaw Link. But if you look, it does not have the hand space. It has significantly more cutting edge on this you can get in 428C, 14C28. You can get this one in that price range. It's assisted, lots of belly. It's a pretty good knife. It is also heavier to a little bit than that. But it is a fairly heavy-duty knife. I am going to also bring out one because I think that it is a bit of, even though it's a stretch, it still goes right to it. And I'll show you here in a little bit. And that is the Spyderco Para 3. Para 3, almost exactly the same size. Almost exactly the same hand space on the handle. Similar capabilities, even though you got the compression lock, which is really hard to compete with. But as far as being able to open it, wow, I'm not doing so well today. You have all those. And I did cut my finger, so I'm having a little trouble with the finger hole there, if I can get it in there. This happens to be a Frankenstein one where the BD1N that is in the normal Para 3 lightweight, I have replaced with the CPM S45VN from the other one. But it works pretty much the same, and it has a little bit less cutting edge, but similar hand space. This right here is a hard combination to deny. Very similar in cutting edge length, very similar in ergonomics. Slightly more spaced for 4 fingers without the choil on the Honey Badger when it comes to ergonomics. Again, bearings, great action. If you don't like the FRN, even though it has the nested liner here, which gets to, this is really great knife. It has a fairly large carry profile, and it has a fairly significant flipper tab. CRKT on bearings, great action. This one's not as broken in as my Honey Badger, but this is also fantastic. One of the reasons why I call this the Para 3 killer, I will try and show right now. I don't know if you can see the similarity of that ergonomic setup But basically, if you can fit on the Para 3, you can fit on the CRKT. Couple of things here. Para 3. Spyderco is ergonomically fantastic with this knife. This thing sits like this. You can pinch up. It's got the thumb ramp. It's going nowhere forward. You can jab with it. You've got plenty of positive grip with your hands. There's lots of curves on it that keep it in there. Even a little bit of a tail that keeps your hand in there. It's not quite so much something you want to cut back, but you can if you really need to. You can get up. You can choke up. You know, finger the blade, choke up, get some point control in lots of different ways, as well as sturdy. But it favors the thumb on top grip over the pinch grip. And it is outstanding with the thumb on top. CRKT, a little bit slimmer, definitely a good action as well. And it is fantastic. It does not do so well either on the if you choke back. It definitely kind of gets a little bit awkward. And the balance point being where it is, which is slightly back here, back near your middle finger, means that it's going to be basically placed, the pivot point and the balance point are going to be basically placed right on top of your front knuckle when you're in the thumb on top grip, which means you have really good leverage and angles when you're moving. One of the other things it does is if you place your knuckle over the top in the pinch grip, if it moves back, it puts it right under that knuckle. So you can push down on this knife really good in the pinch grip. That extra large front choil also really, when you get that power knuckle over the top, a modified pinch grip, and your fingers in there, you're solid, you're good. This is a really nice grip. And this knife does better in that type of grip than the Para 3. Para 3 does better in the thumb, but this one's still pretty sweet. It's sort of like, wow, which kind of candy do you like, right? But it really does do an outstanding job in both ways. Para 3 is a bit more expensive, and it comes in BD1, and of course, if you have other Para 3s, other than the lightweight, it's even more expensive, but it comes in outstanding steels. This comes in D2, which is a really good, high edge retention, cheap steel. Cannot compete with the compression lock for ease of use. But, I mean, frame lock, pretty solid. And when it gets right down to it, carry profile. Much smaller carry profile. Significantly smaller than the honey. At the highest point, it's the same as the honey badger's lowest, if you're not a little better, and without the little pocket pecker in there, to use a Nick Shabazz term. So you get a lot of the benefits of those knives in a much smaller carry profile. It is heavier than either of those knives. I don't have a scale or anything like that, but it is noticeably heavier than either of those knives. But let's be real, this is a solidly made knife. It is solid G10, it's solid stainless steel. It is D2. It is made to work. This is heavy. It's not overly heavy stock, especially compared to something like the Para 3 or the... When you start looking at these, as far as the same, it's basically the same blade stock as those. I don't know if you'll ever be able to see that on video. But the blade stock is essentially the same. When you look at the thickness, it's essentially the same as these two. So that's never been a problem with them. It doesn't have the full flat grind, but it is definitely a fairly large scale grind on that. To get right to the point, it's as good as the Honey Badger, even if, I mean, there's people who are going to like the Honey Badger's looks. The Honey Badger's a bit slimmer, though. It's not much. The inset, if there was one thing I would love to see this thing do, as far as the Pilar 3 goes, if there's anything, it would be contoured. I'm a fan of contouring, even more chamfering on there and all that sort of stuff. I get why they don't, and it's more of a frame lock than anything. But this is the kind of design that once you start swapping scales or anything on it, you can really maximize this design. But if it had contouring, like the Honey Badger, there would be very little to even discuss about this knife. That's probably the one thing I like. It's a little bit bigger for bigger hands. You can get back. The Honey Badger's definitely there. I have the Warren cleaver shape because I happen to not only like the look of the Warren cleaver, but the extra down space is something that I use with this style of knife a lot. It's a bigger knife. But you can have a drop point to get a little bit more curve and belly to it like the CRKT and have a very similar experience. Deep carry clip. This is a pretty close knife. This one's lighter weight, a little bit larger in the handle space. If you get the drop point with the choil, it'll probably be fairly similar in blade, cutting edge length, and all that stuff. Very close competitor to the Honey Badger. And in some ways, especially if you're looking at the BD1N version of, it is a bit of a Para 3 competitor, even though the Para 3 is so much more expensive. It doesn't have the compression lock and all that stuff, but as far as usability, it's very, very similar in cutting edge. It's very, very similar in ergonomic capacity. It's very, very similar in size. It is truly very, very, very similar to the Para 3, as well as the outstanding ergonomics that go with a Voxnace design. It is just outstanding, and the action is well done. This is a great knife. If you haven't figured out by that, this is an outstanding knife. In fact, when it gets right down to it, when you start talking about knives in this range, the only one that comes close in this price range, and it does have a lot more customizability, is the Honey Badger. It's also a little bit more expensive. I think this is $50, and I believe this is $60 or thereabouts. Not bad. There's other D2s, but they're just definitely the smaller, slimmer knife when it gets down to it. So if you're looking for something that's a little more filling in the hand, definitely is a user blade. It's made to be used. It's heavy duty stainless steel. It's got solid J10, but it's at a decent price, $40, $60. It's slightly cheaper than the Honey Badger, with a lot of the same great qualities of the Honey Badger. A lot of the same qualities as the Para 3 without the fantastic locking mechanism. Doesn't quite have as much deep carry and isn't as lightweight, but definitely gives you more of a feeling of solidity when you're using it in your hand. This is a great user. I've used it to do work on several boxes now. This is a keeper. Honestly, if there's secondary markets for these scales and all that sort of stuff, this would be so easy. Or another model that's upscale with like carbon fiber and titanium and something else, like, I don't know, S35VN or S30V or something. You give me something like that at 100, 120 bucks. This thing's a monster. I really like this knife. The action is fantastic. The balance is spot on. The ergonomics are as good as anything out there. It would be nice if it had some contouring. It would be fantastic if the clip wasn't, had prioritized over the lanyard, but where it is isn't bad, and it gives you a little bit to pinch that isn't the clip. And again, for the price point, it's right up there with anything. It becomes a matter of taste, but you could definitely do a lot worse than the CRKT Pilar 3.